A few years ago, we purchased three brand new stand on leaf blowers. And I can tell you that without a doubt, it was 100% not worth it for us. In this video, I'm going to give you some more context as to the test that we did to decide if it was worth it, and also give you a little bit of my insight into buying specifically stand on leaf blowers. And I'm also going to open myself up to a bunch of negative comments from people who swear by these things and love them. So I'm fully prepared for that. But if you are new to this channel, my name is Nick Staples, and over the past 9 years, my business partner and I have grown our landscaping business to over $3 million in annual recurring revenue by offering basic maintenance services like leaf cleanups, for example. And so here's the story. So there was one fall season where we were severely understaffed. We were expecting to, have only about two-thirds of the amount of people we needed. I think we needed like 20 people. We only had like 14 or something like that. And so we were like, well, how can we make sure we can do the same amount of work? Well, let's go and buy some stand on leaf blowers for half of our crews. That will speed them up, and that will make it so, two guys can do the work of three guys, at least in theory. That's what we thought. So we went out, we bought them. They were $13,000 each. So pretty expensive. So $39,000, we financed them, and it was like $650 a month to do it. So we were like, okay, so $650 a month for the year, that's like $7,200 or $8,000 a year. So will these three machines save us about $8,000 a year at least? And what we found was, so we had three crews. We had two or three crews that did not have the stand on leaf blower. And then we had two or three crews, or so I should say three crews that did. And we looked at their job times. How long were their jobs taking them? Were they going faster, or was it the same, or whatever? And so after an entire fall season, we found that it was a roughly, if I remember correctly, I don't have it documented anymore. So it was quite a while ago. We found that the crews that had the stand on leaf blowers went about, it was roughly like 10% faster. And when we did the math out, we basically figured out that the machines just barely paid for themselves. So that's, 650 a month times 12, whatever that number is, around, 7,500, 8,000. We found that we saved about that much money in labor by having these machines. Now you'd hear that and you would think to yourself, okay, well, that makes sense then, right? It's worth it. They're doing more work. And so you're saving money and it pays for the machine. That's good, right? Well, that's not the only factor you have to consider when you're deciding if equipment purchase is worth it. So we spent, again, a lot of money on these machines. Now, we financed them. So let's talk about that for a second. So, especially when you're newer in business, you only have so much financing power. You only are able to borrow so much money. So, for us, having the machine just justify the cost was not enough to make it worth it, because it didn't really help us grow. It just helped us stay the same. And so now we just tied up that $13,000 times three, $39,000 worth of financing power in these machines that just basically helped us do what we were able to do before. What would have been better potentially is we take that $39,000 and we use it to finance a truck, which allows us to have a whole new crew, which allows us to add, $200,000 or $300,000 in annual revenue. So that's like opportunity cost, right? Is this really expensive piece of equipment? Sure, maybe it justifies its cost, but could you have spent that money better elsewhere? And that's one I don't think a lot of people don't think about. I mean, we certainly didn't in the beginning. And so for us, we looked at it and it wasn't worth it. The other thing that happened too was, like I said, we saved in labor what the machine payment was, but that didn't include repair and maintenance. So now we have these three random pieces of equipment that have to be repaired. And let me tell you, they broke all the time. Now, I'm sure there's some machines that are better than others, whatever. But for us, like, they were just breaking constantly. It wasn't, it's, they seem to be the type of equipment that's relatively low volume in terms of like manufacturing compared to say like mowers. Like tons and tons of people buy mowers, not quite as many people buy stand on leaf blowers. So to us, it felt like they just weren't built very well. They were breaking constantly. And on top of that, too, on top of the repair and maintenance cost, you also have to have a whole nother section in your training manual to teach people how to use them efficiently. So now what I'll say is I fully acknowledge that our crews probably were not trained as well as they could have been on how to use them. But with that said, again, that there's cost involved in that. There's cost in the training. And for us, we only bought 3 of them because they were so expensive, but at the time, we had 5 or 6 crews going out and doing cleanups. So now you have this thing where there's some crews that have them, some crews that don't. Complicated the scheduling because some crews could go slightly faster. It also made people maybe not feel quite as happy because they're like, "Why did this guy get a machine, but I don't?" And then there were some properties where the machine was better used than others, but maybe that crew wasn't on that property. So like maybe one crew has a really big yard that day, but they're not the crew that has the stand on leaf blower because the scheduling, again, this is what I meant. It complicates the scheduling. If you truly want to be efficient with the utilization of these things, then you have to, schedule properly. You have to take whatever big properties you have that the machine works best on and put it on that property. But again, that's just complicated. And so for us, it was like, do we really want to buy 2 or 3 more of these things that are breaking constantly, that our guys, are not maybe using the best, and that are just barely kind of justifying even having and tying up our financing power or our cash, right? The same is true if you paid for them in cash. Um, you don't want to use your cash on, this, maybe you use it for marketing instead. And so those are all the things that we had to think about. And ultimately for us, it made it so they just weren't worth it. Now, like I said, I know I'm opening myself up to negative comments for people who went out and bought them. And I will say, if you're an owner operator and you work on the crew and it's you and 2 or 3 other people, there is, I think, a stronger argument there for buying a stand-on leaf blower. But if you're planning on scaling your maintenance business, unless you're doing massive commercial properties, then I personally don't think that specifically stand-on leaf blowers are worth it. Again, for the owner operator who's going to be the one who's using it most of the time, and you're just trying to maximize your personal earnings by doing jobs faster, then sure, it could make sense. And I've seen that use case be true. But also I've seen people who've had them and they've also complained that they break constantly. So, it's something to consider. But yeah, so kind of one of the biggest takeaways we had from this was, if you are going to buy something new or buy a better piece of equipment for your business, it's always a good idea to do a little test with it first. And I would say we half tested, right? So we didn't buy everyone one, we bought 3 people one, or 3 crews worth of, stand-on blowers. What probably would have been smarter is if we just bought one machine and we said, what does it take to get someone to use this effectively? Let's give it to one guy who we know is good and watch and see, make sure the equipment is reliable, make sure he knows how to use it, make sure that we have a good way of scheduling for it, and do all that before you commit to buying multiple of this type of equipment. And that would have made a huge difference. So if you are considering like a big purchase, like a stand-on leaf blower or whatever, buying just one first before you buy it for all of your crews, I think, is a smarter idea. But again, you have to consider opportunity costs. What else could you buy instead that would make you more efficient? Do you want to deal with the repair and maintenance and the training, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And so hopefully this video doesn't trigger too many people who maybe already bought one or just bought one. Or maybe it helps some people who are thinking about it, who are on the line, maybe hold off for now, or at least do a test, like I said. Again, I don't make too many videos about equipment specifically, but I thought that this specific example kind of was a good principle that applies to anything. Again, especially with the buying of numerous units before just testing it with one. We've made that mistake before too, even with just mowers where we switched to a different brand, and rather than just testing out one of the mowers from the brand, we literally replaced our entire fleet, and then within months half the fleet was broken because they all had the same problem. And we got through it, but nonetheless, had we bought one of them or two of them instead of 12 or 14 of them, then we probably could have mitigated, or at least known what we were dealing with, right? So maybe you decide that the thing that is breaking, you're fine to deal with it. But if you know that going into it, you're going to be much more prepared to keep your equipment running than if it all hits at once and then you have to scramble and figure out what to do. And so again, for us, stand on leaf blowers were not worth it, not even close. But I'm curious to see what you have to say in the comments below. And if you have any questions about this more specifically, let me know. If you're wondering the specific type we had, I think we had like a 29 horsepower. Um, Maybe it was Billy Goat. I don't remember the brand. Hurricane, maybe. I think it might have been Hurricane. 29 horsepower stand on blowers. There's a bunch of different brands. Skag makes some. There's a bunch of different ones. So, in our experience, the ones we bought were pretty crappy. Didn't justify the cost.